Hi, everybody. This is an assignment briefing on reflection on practice or in practice learning assignment. So this is for the draft assignment. My advice will be do the draft. It's always a good idea to get feedback. So there you go. Purpose of today's session, review the reflection on practice formative assignment. And also you could think about models of reflection. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but I am going to point you to where that is covered in other modules, SW4014 in particular, and indeed there's a link on the Canvas page of this module, SW4014. So pause, deep breaths, maybe even make the screen bigger so this will be easier for you to see as we go. In a sort of way, things are very busy. You have all sorts of assignments. I have no doubt it's confusing. Seeing your module evaluation questionnaires, some of you were quite confused about what's happening when, and that's entirely understandable. But perhaps this is an opportunity just to kind of pause, take a little break, step back from what you're doing, and take the opportunity to review how far you've come since the start of the course. So the assignment instructions, you said in the module evaluation feedback that the 10th is a little too early, so I've moved that a week forward to the 17th of April. If you're a little bit late after the 17th April, it's not the end of the world. We're quite flexible with drafts, but it's in your own interest to get one in earlier and to get the feedback earlier because it gives you a bit of time to kind of do a bit of work on that. The full details are on the assignment tab. You will get these slides on Canvas and by an announcement, so you'll be able to follow them up. But I think you should be able to navigate your way around Canvas at this stage and be able to find the full assignment details on the relevant page. And just for belt and braces, this is actually the text from that tab. So it's your first reflection on practice learning, and you will be doing them throughout the course. So this is the first major one we're asking you to do, and it is of no more than 1,000 words. Please do not go over the word count. If you remember, the feedback and the guidance for agency description kind of made that pretty clear. There are penalties. If you do go over, I would prefer not to have to penalize people. I really would. So bear that in mind. Again, strongly advised to submit a draft. You should submit drafts every time you have the opportunity because you get feedback. You get to change it rather than kind of, make some kind of small errors or basic things you don't quite interpret right in the final assignment. Avoid that. Get a bit of feedback. Ask your SRA or the course tutor for their opinion. They'll be written in the first person. So this reflection is very much about you. So you can say, I did, I thought, I felt. But you do have to support your RPL with references to books, articles, and research. So I didn't really ask you to do that too much in the agency description. I want you to up the game here because I think you'll find yourself kind of like reflecting on things and you go, oh, I wonder, is there an academic research for that? Well, you could ask me, you could ask your SRA, because no doubt if you're kind of reflecting on something that's got to do with your practice development, somebody is likely to have written about that at some stage. You have to do the professional standards. Again, I think you got the hang of that more or less. The agency description, now these will be the IATE standards and the PCF. So the IATE, take a little while to get used to that. Don't worry about it too much, but do have a go. It's important that you attempt to do that rather than just ignore it. More on that later. It should evidence work with a person or family with lived experience of social work to enable apprentices to reflect on different aspects of their practice and development. I hope that's fairly free, fairly clear. A focus on a recent direct observation is all right, People sometimes do that, but only do it if you're going to add value to the reflection. If you have further thoughts, you know, you got a lot out of it, and you can tell me in 1,000 words about that, because otherwise you're narrowing your opportunities for reflection. I know it might be easier in some ways just to recycle that material, but it isn't really in the spirit of learning, in my view. So we do have some prompt questions, and these are provided as a guide only. You do not have to go through them exhaustively, but they may help your thinking when you're trying to structure your assignment or think about what you want to write about. Now, what has helped your learning? You know, what have been the big things? Is that your mentor? Is that looking at things now with the eye of somebody who's going to be a social worker in the future? Did you use supervision effectively? Again, we'll come back to that. Do you know about your own areas of strengths, areas where you feel you might need to develop more skills? That kind of examination of ourselves is reflective practice, but it's also very helpful in our professional development. Don't forget to reflect on what you did well. It doesn't always have to be about, oh, I wish I could have done that a bit better or a bit more of that. It's also a good idea to kind of have a good sense of what your strengths are. What surprised or shocked you? On occasion. And I go, what? And that's appropriate too. Think about what you might do differently in the future, what you learn about yourself, or indeed the people that you work with. Sometimes learning is about team or organization. You kind of go, we could do that a little bit better. Or having spoken to many of my colleagues, I feel quite fortunate to work in the team that I work in. Feedback from your SRA, mentor, people with lived experience of social work. You should have got some of that from all of those people by now. Maybe that was a formative or very important learning experience for you. Values, social work values, is a constant in the course. It's a lifelong learning project, something we think about and develop and work on throughout our careers. On occasion, you may come across an ethical or personal dilemma, something that clashes with your own values. Those things are very worth reflecting on because they kind of move us on in terms of our professional identity. So there are marking criteria. Again, this is still from the assignment tab, as it were, and you can see there are 4 of them. Now, I am going to go through all 4 of them, so and this, by the time I'm finished talking about this slide, you've probably read them, but it should be reflective rather than descriptive writing. You should have discussed your learning with other professionals. I'll come back to that. And the last 2 will pay less attention to, but nonetheless, the work should include appropriate references and citations, done in the Harvard style, which we use, refer back to the agency description, and it should be well structured, thought out, and kind of have a logical flow. I don't like to see too many grammatical errors and typos, can't say the word right, and I'm sure neither do you. And the last one is you will reference the appropriate professional standards. Now, the thing is, the marking, you eventually come to it, this is formative, so you're not going to get a mark for each one, is based on all 4 criteria. So when you complete your essay, make sure you hit 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, pause again for a second in the interest or spirit of reflection. What do we mean by reflection and practice learning? What is that? Practice learning, of course, is on-the-job learning. That's hopefully informed by the taught content, KU, on your other modules. So that's kind of clear. Practice learning is the 2 things, really, what you're learning on your job, in your place of employment, and how that might be influenced by what you're taking out of the class, and probably other sources as well. Well, what do we mean by reflection? A word we hear over and over again, but let's go back to some stuff we addressed earlier in the year. So we kind of covered, or at least started, an exploration of this in the first module you did, transitions into social work. Now that little link there is to actually some pages and PowerPoint presentation, etc., etc. You may recognize that photograph from there. But in that presentation, there are several models of or for reflection. Dewey, Burton, Schoen, Kolb, Gibbs, Greenaway, and there are plenty more. Oh, I could have put Moon in there, but I didn't, for example. So if you find some other model to structure your reflection that you prefer, by all means, feel free to use that. The reason we use these models is they help to structure our thinking. They kind of enable us to kind of push our thinking on a little bit more because we follow the model and we say, oh, the next stage, maybe I could kind of push this on a little bit more. Now, you're not absolutely required to use a model of reflection, but they generally do help. Test them out, do a little draft, kind of do a little kind of a page and just put down one of the models and kind of say, what would I say under each of these sections? Try it out, test. This is what that presentation looked like. Just to kind of remind you, kind of like jog your memory a little bit. But back to criteria. We have to think, okay, we've got a little bit of this. That was one of the slides. Let's have a little bit more. So I can go back to those materials. What's the first criteria? The critical evaluation of learning development. The submission should be reflective rather than descriptive. Have a look at the slides and see what reflective means. It just essentially means examining or thinking about our own practice and critically learning from that and trying to do something new in the future. That's at its very simplest level, really. You should evidence this. You should show how that happened for you and what learning you took from it. I think in social work, why do we go on about this? Again, you might recognize this slide from 4011. It's to enhance your own self-awareness. That has potential later on. You can see be conscious of our potential for bias and discrimination. We all have that potential. Sometimes we bring it into the room. Sometimes it's not very helpful to the people we're working with or indeed to ourselves. So it's kind of, a personal development project, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? The more I know about myself and understand about my motivations and how I react in various different situations, the more likely I am to do a better job. So it helps us create or to be creative when we're faced with difficulties and problems. It improves problem solving skills, because we get used to kind of having a more deliberate and analytical approach to some of the things we come across in work. Linked to that is an ability or enhancing an ability to evaluate situations, to explore them. Models quite helpful like that. And pushes us to action plan for success, pushes us to kind of think, well, what's the next stage then? Rather than just reflecting, oh, that didn't go very well, and just leaving it there, we kind of go, well, this has to have an outcome of some description. Mentioned before, attempts to be conscious of our own potential for bias and discrimination, but that might extend to that kind of potential that other people might also have. Make the best use of knowledge available, so use literature and evidence to inform that reflection. If you come across things that you're interested in, topics, themes, read about them, find out more about them. That'll help you challenge and develop your existing professional knowledge base, possibly avoid repeating mistakes, and maximize our opportunities for learning. So that's the kind of basis, really, why we do this critical reflection. And what about the difference between description and analysis? Well, description is good. You're required to describe things quite frequently as a social worker and as a learner, and the ability to give an effective account, which isn't too wordy, really, helps other people to understand it as you saw. You pick the right amount of detail, the significant detail. That's quite an art of itself, and kind of analogous what we might do in good case discussion. We don't like to read notes that go on and on and on. I'm sure you find yourself reading things every so often, really, and you might feel like, get to the point. Do you know what I mean? So that's part of our skills and description. So it should be clear, concise, well structured, and objective rather than emotional. thoughts and feelings are recorded. You say, I felt, I thought. But when we come to analysis, then we need to do a little bit more with those thoughts and feelings and the description. We break things down into constituent parts. We identify positives, negatives, issues. We don't always have a resolution of those things, but we at least attempt a resolution. We come up with some sort of forward planning that we will test and then bring back again to retest until perhaps we end up with an appropriate solution. Identify and challenge assumptions. We all make assumptions about people all the time. You make assumptions about me. Core staff probably make some assumptions about you. We have to be very careful about our assumptions that we make of each other and subject them to analysis. Of course, you can also make connections. The connections may be many and varied. There may be connections to your own life experience, for example, your own previous experience in practice, your experience with your colleagues, the kind of discussions that you might have in class and outside of class that kind of change your views on things. Ideally, we'd like to think about external sources. Part of that is going to be theory and research, but also part of it is the wider social and political context within which we all live, and the people with lived experience that we work with certainly are impacted by the broader social context in which they are living. I was wondering how that sentence was going to end. I wonder were you. So, formative assignment RPL criterion 2. Recognition of feedback from others. Now, if you remember, I said, make sure you get all 4 criteria. Now, really, the reflection on what happened and what you learned is the most important thing here, but all 4 criteria must be addressed, at least to some extent. And in this instance, we're asking you to talk to, who did you talk to in supervision about your practice? Now, you'll see later on there's a couple of different ways you might go with the subject of your analysis or your reflection. But in all instances, once the evidence that you have used supervision effectively to kind of do a bit of practice exploration and professional development. Sometimes that feedback will come from people with lived experience, but it could come from other people as well. Manager, mentor, SRA, colleagues, something that demonstrates your willingness to learn from the views of others and to make changes as required. We did address this also. The link here is to the schedule page in 4011, but session 12 links to slides and the recording. So the material is there. I thought it might be helpful to link to that. But also on the Canvas page, there is a page specifically about using supervision support. That's the link there. You can see that we don't locate supervision and support just in the social worker or the learner. Expert is expert by experience, a person with lived experience. Organization is the broader context, our employing agencies, essentially, really. And around that is the profession, the social work, international social work profession. All of those levels at some way, shape or form may provide us with supervision and support in various different ways. So you don't have to kind of narrow what you cover here. It may cover or it may extend into things beyond just, how would I say, formal supervision sessions that you all should be having. And I very much hope that you are. Again, another slide from that particular deck. It's about seeing reflective supervision as a learning process. Part of this is that we learn how to be better supervisees and how to get something more out of it. It takes a little while. I mean, I suppose it's kind of counterintuitive. Sometimes we're quite used to managerial supervision where we're just asked about, did you do such and such? Now go off and do such and such, right? Just kind of task-centered supervision. That's not really quite enough, or in fact, anywhere near enough for your professional development as a learner and for your ongoing career as a social worker. So you get to explore practice and factors influencing it, emotions, assumptions, power, of course, ever present in our practice and affect everything we do in the world. So we get a shared understanding of underpinning knowledge, and we use that to inform next steps. You can see that kind of theme coming a lot. Exploration, trying to work out what's happening. What do you do next? Hopefully that makes sense. Criteria 3, work is appropriate for the academic level. Now, kind of went into this in some detail, really, in the agency description feedback. I've put the recorded feedback there. Hopefully you will have seen that. On Canvas, of course, there's also the actual slides, and they were sent out by announcement, so they've gone out to the group in several different ways, so hopefully you can access them again. So just write clearly, professionally, keep it in the word count, make sure you cite in text, and provide a list of references at the end. Try to make it clear without grammatical errors and typos. And remember, colleagues might give feedback from that. I find actually one of the best things you can do is actually read it out loud to yourself. That actually helps. You kind of go, oh, right, okay, never thought of that. Give that a go. Whatever works for you, but make sure that you're trying to maintain the academic standards for level 4. And finally, references the appropriate professional standards. Now, there are 2 different, maybe 3 different ways of doing it. You can write them in the text, or you can have a little column down the side. Some people did that in the agency description assignment. I think that's quite useful as these kind of tasks and essays get more and more complex as you go. Sometimes that's not a bad way to do it. It's not the only way. It's up to yourself, really, and your own choices in the matter. PCF, again, this is from previous slide deck. This is critical reflection, by critical reflection and analysis to inform a rationale for professional decision making. So that's the end result. We have to make decisions about what we do. Something has to happen. Now, I'm not going to read the whole paragraph, but you can see there's lots of elements to it. But really, at this stage, I would expect from reading the essays to see that you have an understanding of the role of reflective practice, and you can show you're working out, as it were, that you need to construct and apply hypotheses in social work practice, that you have some kind of complex or difficult issues, perhaps, or something about your own professional development or whatever it happens to be, and you can describe why evidence is important and how you can use it. And really, that's what they ask at the early kind of stages of your professional development. The PCF. And now the IATE. Everybody's thinking, oh my God, Dermot, am I ever going to understand that? I have a similar issue because they have now changed the IATE standards. Now we're going to use the set that are currently in place. I just want to see you do the basics so you can get K1, K4, S1, S4, B1, 2, 3, whatever it happens to be. That's skills, knowledge, behaviors. And I want you to be able to see in your essay that you have included both sets. They don't necessarily match up very well. I'm quite conscious of the deficits and the kind of tool we sent out to you in an attempt to help you do this. There are mistakes in it. It's just as well that in this year, we're still all collectively learning about this. There will be a finalized set next year when, in fact, the stakes are a little bit higher. We will spend more time on that. We'll have developed a better mapping document before you start the next year in September. Do as good as you can with it. That's basically what I'm saying. But don't ignore it. Come back to me and talk. If you have particular issues, I'll try to help as much as I can. At the end of the day, this is about you. It's a rather kind of laboured metaphor, but this is a car looking back on where we have been, and we're in a car, so we're going forward. But I want to hear about you, your professional development. That's really what the main focus is here. Broadly speaking, people tend to take 2 different goes at this. Now, I have asked the level 5s for exemplars, and I will be posting a sample of those on Canvas, and I'll let you know when I do that. But people basically either go overall learning. When I started the course, this is what I thought. Now I'm here in April. This is what I'm thinking now. This is also what I'm feeling. And these are the changes that have happened to me over the time. Or critical incident. One thing happened. This was really important to me. It kind of blew me out of the water. I didn't know what was coming or going, but it turns out that it was really important learning for me. So they're the kind of main options that people take. Overall learning, go back to those questions on the assignment guidance in Canvas. I'm not going to go way through all the slides again, but you remember there was a couple of prompt questions. Those are not a bad way to start off. But think in general, what made the biggest difference to your learning this year? You know, was it supervision? You read something and you kind of went, whoa. You may have read something and you kind of went, oh my God, that's confirmation of what I've been doing all this time. I never know or never knew it was called. That kind of thing. Did off the job learning, in other words, what you did in class in taught sessions at Kingston, change your on the job practice. I stuttered there a little bit because I noticed there's a typo. Please forgive me the typo. I am not going to record the whole thing all over again to put in that or. Did you notice differences in your practice and professional development? I would be very surprised if you didn't. And it would really, hugely surprise me. See if you can articulate what those things were, if you can explain them, if you can write them in such a way that somebody who hasn't come across you before or seen you in practice would understand that journey. What did other people see or say? Sometimes people see changes in us that we don't see ourselves. In fact, the key skill in social work is to point out to people when they have made, in particular, positive changes. Quite often, when people are in the middle of change, they don't see it quite so clearly, and they quite often don't see the progress they have made. So maybe other people's views and opinions might be very helpful in that regard. So critical incident is something happened, right? And you can, if you like, use critical reflection as a vehicle for this. So instead of going overall learning, something happened in your practice that really was very important to you. Now, it might be in the direct observation. I kind of prefer if you wouldn't use that. I'm not being kind of totally, no, never. But it's kind of like, if you use that again, you're kind of narrowing the material that you're actually focusing on. So if you've reflected already in your direct observation about that, you'd really want to be adding some significant value to it to kind of up the game a little bit, if you see what I mean. I hope that makes some sort of sense. So, critical incidents is kind of phrase that's used in academic literature. It's used in a number of different ways. So what is it? It is whatever was important to you, funny enough. Simple as that. It might be something in work or learning, moment of realization. Quite often, somewhere along the line, there's a bit of realization in there in some way, shape, or form. So there are incidents which cause us to think and reflect, which leads us to learn about ourselves or others, or about processes, learning to be social worker, and so on and so forth. A great many of them are not dramatic or obvious, but commonplace events, as it says here, that occur routinely in social work education and or professional practice. If you wanted to read a bit more about that, chapter 10 in Lister, Pam Lister's 2012 book, Integrating Social Work Theory and Practice, a practical skills guide. Very nice book. It's kind of in some ways you could argue a bit more advanced than we need at level 4, but it's a very good book. It is available in ICANN. I hope it's available. I should have checked, shouldn't I? I'm almost certain it's available as an ebook because it's a very common textbook that a lot of people used. I will be checking that, and I'll be downloading the chapter and making it available to you. Yeah, interesting. I've just learned something about myself. Well, don't worry, I'll take care of that. So hopefully rather than get distracted by my kind of musing at the end of this chapter, you get this idea. Critical incident is whatever was most important to you. Feedback works, guys. Seek feedback at every opportunity. Now, on occasion, you're not going to be able to get a draft done, even within the flexibility allowed for formative assignments. Sometimes you might think it's more important than others. Sometimes you just, prefer not. So to you, it's your choice. But feedback is the fuel that drives improved performance. Sometimes it's certainly I've had feedback and I've written things and I just got completely the wrong end of the stick. And somebody just kind of says to me, "No, Dermot, it's supposed to be about this," and you kind of go, "Oh, right, okay." Sometimes it's misinterpretation of criteria, things of this nature, but it can also be about structure, grammar, references. There's any amount of different things that could be about. But every time you get a bit of that feedback, that means you can change it. That's the name of the game. It's the whole thing about social work and social work education. I say here, attributed to Eric Parslow. Parslow was a very well-known writer about coaching. Coaching, in fact, even though we think it's quite mysterious, is entirely almost about feedbacking and helping people come to their own conclusions about problems, issues in their life. Use the feedback. Have I said that enough now? I believe I have. So that really is the end of the slides. And I will, of course, be available for questions and announcements, perhaps. Come back to you, check about that chapter. And I'm waiting for your drafts. You can upload them anytime that you like, and we will feedback pretty promptly. It'll either be the SRA or one of the court staff, but court staff? Freudian slip there, or one of the teaching staff, but we will get feedback to you as quick as we possibly can. So we look forward to reading your drafts. Take care. Quite enough for me now. Bye.